Welcome back to Going Walkabout. When we were getting ready for my retirement 3 years ago, we seemed to get a lot of videos on YouTube talking about retirement. No surprise there. But ones that were saying, retire cheap in Mexico, like this one. Or it could have been retire on this affordable beach for $300 a month. Then there's always the one that really got me, which was $250 a month rental home and expensive is only $1,500 a month budget. All of that seemed pretty amazing to me. So of course, day one of my retirement, we packed up the car and headed off to Mexico so that we could see if we could live this affordable lifestyle. We've gone from living in La Paz in the Baja to Los Barrios in the Baja. We lived in San Miguel de Allende as well as Oaxaca City. We've lived in most of these places at least a month and sometimes 3 months. Mexico City we've lived in at least 6 months. We found out a lot about the costs in Mexico and if those videos that I saw previously were real or only clickbait. In this video, we'll be looking at the four biggest buckets of costs for living in a different country, in this case in Mexico. We'll be ending with the biggest bucket, which is going to be accommodation. The exciting thing is that I have our actual numbers from last year, so I'm going to be able to do a real cost comparison for you of the United States compared to Mexico with actual costs when it comes to things like food and accommodation. So those will be the last two buckets that we discuss. And all of this to answer that one big question: is living in Mexico a cheaper way of life? Okay, before we get started with bucket one, let me state that this information is from our budget. Everybody's budget can be vastly or wildly different. So please keep that in mind as you're looking at these numbers and so forth. Also, I'm in no way recommending that people move to Mexico. Rather, I'm just trying to give people real data so that they can make an educated decision if they're deciding to either travel here or possibly live here permanently. Okay, bucket one is transportation, and that includes flying in the country or when you land, getting a rental car. So flying in Mexico is easily 25 to 50% less than when you fly in the United States. We have found that we've saved a ton of money in visiting different cities because of that. Now, let me give you just a brief example. So if you go from Mexico City to Puerto Vallarta, that's anywhere from $48 to $71 one way. If you were to fly from Los Angeles to Puerto Vallarta, you're looking at $122 to $135 one way. I used to fly a lot internally in the United States, and my tickets were anywhere from $300 to $1,500. It just depends on the time, obviously, and the distance. But in Mexico, we've not paid anything over $75 to fly from one place to another within the country. Also, I will say that the key airlines, which are Viva Aerobus and Aeromexico, are outstanding. The service has been outstanding. They've been on time. They do a really good job, in my opinion, of getting everybody on the plane and then leaving on time and so forth. So with that said, we've been really, really happy with the transportation. So the second thing I had mentioned would be a rental car, and we have not found that that is less expensive in Mexico. It certainly depends on where you are, and you might be able to get a deal here in Merida. They had very good deals for rental cars, but we haven't needed one because we walk everywhere. With that said, we have taken a rental car from Oaxaca City to Huatulco, and that was not inexpensive. It worked out well, but it wasn't inexpensive. So I would say when it comes to the rental cars, that is not something that you're going to be saving a huge amount of money on. Certainly that is why we tend to pick cities that we can walk to the market or wherever we need to go during the day so that we don't have to depend on that. They do use Uber a lot here, and it is very inexpensive. Here in Merida, it's incredibly inexpensive to take Uber wherever you need to go, grocery store or beach or wherever. And the highest tip you can give is 20 pesos, which is $1. So it's a really good system here. We found the same thing in Mexico City. So transportation overall, flying, very inexpensive. Cars, not so much, but certainly Uber and things of that nature, very, very inexpensive. Okay, our second bucket is healthcare. And I'm going to go over this quickly because I've covered it in other videos, so please have a look at those if time allows. I'll put a couple of them up here and over here. But certainly healthcare in this country is quite a bit less than the United States. It is something that we've been able to pay out of pocket whenever we've needed anything, and that includes dentist, pharmaceuticals, and doctor visits. Pharmaceuticals are anywhere from 50 to 75% less than in the United States. Again, I had put this in a previous video, but there are pharmacies all over Mexico, and you can get pretty much anything that you need for quite a bit less money. There's a lot of Canadians and Americans that literally just come to Mexico just to get their pharmaceutical needs taken care of at less cost. We have not gotten insurance in Mexico, but you can get insurance in Mexico. We have been more prone to paying out of pocket. Doctor visits run anywhere from $75 to maybe $150. What we have found is that the bedside manner is fantastic. So when you go to a doctor and they're recommending things to you that you do, they tend to follow up with you. They also tend to give you their WhatsApp number or their phone number so that you can call them and have a dialogue with them. Those are all things that, again, we're not experiencing with American healthcare. But if we're just talking financially, healthcare here is definitely less expensive than the United States. So this is food, which is a big one, and it's going to take me a little bit more time to go through all of this because we're going to dive into some numbers here. First off, I want to explain that we lived in Palm Desert for 3 months last year, and then we lived in Mexico City right after for 3 months. That worked out really well because I was able to track our expenses with food and be able to serve those up to you. What I would ask you to do though is I did a video on Palm Desert, so if you want to look at that area here, and then I've done a video on Mexico City. The reason I want you to at least have knowledge of these areas is that we lived in middle income areas. I would say it's an apples to apples comparison. So in other words, we're not living in a lower income area in America compared to a high income area in Mexico or vice versa. I think that's important because I think when you're comparing things like food, you have to compare, like to like. And in this case, Mexico City to Palm Desert, very similar in that regard. So for April, May, and June in Palm Desert, we spent $4,624. For July, August, and September in Mexico City, we spent $3,950. So that's a total savings of $674 overall in 3 months, or a whopping $224 a month. I was really surprised by that. I don't keep track of finances at all while we're traveling. I just kind of have a way of kind of knowing, what's realistic or not. Also, I pretty much buy the same types of groceries whether we're in America or we're here in Mexico. So with that said, that's as even a comparison I can think of. And by the way, these numbers include alcohol. So all told, that's a pretty substantial difference, $224 a month. That can buy some more groceries if you need it. So I was pretty happy with that. I did want to add one thing to the food, and that's that in Mexico, you can actually eat out very cheaply as well. So if you didn't want to cook, as we do all the time, and you wanted to eat out, the taco trucks are amazing, and they're not just tacos. They serve burritos, they serve a wide array of food. Many of them do breakfast in the morning for people, and you usually can get away with eating there for less than $2. So you could theoretically eat in Mexico for less than $10 a day. And so you don't need to go to the grocery store. We prefer to eat in, and that's why our expenses are where they're at. But certainly that's something to look into as well. So this brings us to our last and biggest bucket, which is accommodation, and a tricky one. Let me just say this, that we have found that here in Mexico, there are accommodations to fit everybody's pocketbook. In our case, we tend to like to get a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom place. Having a nice kitchen is really important to us. Not necessarily needing a dishwasher and so forth, but we do need at least, let's say, air conditioning. And so because of those standards, our budget comes in possibly different from what yours might be. But I just want to throw that disclaimer out there to start with. Having done this for 3 years, my target budget is around $3,000 a month for accommodation, and this can change pretty dramatically through the year, but if I can keep in that wheelhouse for the year, I'm pretty happy. Some places we're able to get at $1,800 a month, and then some may go up to $4,000. But if it comes out to around that $3,000 price range, I'm pretty satisfied. With that said, we're going to do the same comparison that we did on food. It'll be 3 months in Palm Desert and 3 months in Mexico City. Again, like I said, I think that those are a fair comparison quality-wise. In Palm Desert, we spent $20,188 for 3 months. In Mexico City, we spent $12,718 for a savings of $7,470, which was $2,490 a month. So for us, living in Mexico 3 or 6 months of year is a pretty enormous savings on that accommodation bucket. Please understand that these numbers can change dramatically depending on where you are in Mexico. If you're closer to the ocean or on the ocean, you could be paying quite a bit more. We tend to not stay in touristy areas. And because of that, I believe a lot of our rentals are more fairly priced. So please keep that in mind as you are looking. And then if you are looking, look on Airbnb and do a cost comparison for yourself. If it's a beach place in Mexico, then look up a beach place in America, and you'll quickly be able to see if there's a cost savings there. In this case, I was able to see, as you can see, a very dramatic one. It was funny because before I did the video, I did a little survey on my channel. And by the way, thank you for those of you who actually, pushed the different buttons for the survey. And it was basically saying, is Mexico cheaper to live in by X amount? 15, 25, 30%. Well, kudos to those of you that chose 30 to 50% cheaper, because as you can see from this video, it is 30 to 50% less for those things, those 4 buckets of what I've discussed today. So well done. And it is something now that it's not clickbait anymore. The one thing I want to add is if you truly are looking at moving to Mexico, please understand that the Mexican people are very proud people. They're very kind people. They are the most respectful of other people that I've seen anywhere in the world, really. And due to that, it's really important that if you're thinking of moving here, you learn their customs, you understand their language, at least a little bit of it, and that shows an enormous amount of respect for them if you do that. So please keep that in mind if you're thinking of moving to Mexico. Their world has a lot of inflation in it, and they have to deal with that inflation. Same situation as a lot of us Americans who haven't had pay increases since the 70s. So please keep that in mind and be sensitive to them when you're here. I hope you found the video helpful, and they're realistic numbers, so I'd like to know what you think. Please put your comments below and let me know your thoughts on this. It's not clickbait, it's real, so that's exciting. Thank you for watching today. I really appreciate it. And as always, a thumbs up is huge for the channel. It really helps tremendously. Or better yet, subscribe. We do a new video every week, and would love to see you. Love to have you join us. Thanks again for watching. Cheers for now.